This is Retiring Today, the podcast that guides you to and through retirement. I am Molly Nelson, host of the podcast here with Rochelle Smith. She's the producer of our podcast, and Loren Merkle. He's a certified financial planner, a certified financial fiduciary, and a retirement income certified professional. And we have got a special guest today because when it comes to planning for retirement, we often talk about on the show, be prepared. We hammer home, act now. Well, your end of life is no different. Planning now for yourself and your loved ones can make a very big difference. And that's what we want to talk about today with Ryan Fredregill of Fredregill Funeral and Cremation Care. Loren, this is a perfect conversation today because planning ahead for all of the aspects of retirement can include end-of-life care.
I'm really excited about this conversation today, and there could be some irony with that because we're talking about death and funeral planning and cremation and all those services, so that's not exciting, but it is something that needs to be planned for. And you're right, Molly, we're always talking about the necessity of being prepared going into and then through retirement, and this is a big part of it. Part of the planning components that we talk about is the legacy plan. And this is one of the areas of services that we have not done a good job, have not been able to offer to the families that we work with because it's just not what we do. We do put together an effective legacy plan. We talk about, do you need to update your will? Do you need to incorporate a trust, probate avoidance? How to transition your assets, whatever is left over, in the most efficient manner to your loved ones in your charities? But when we get questions about, should I pre-plan my funeral? What does that look like? Oftentimes, I feel like we don't do that part of it justice. So I'm really excited, Ryan, to have you here today to talk about this to our audience. And the Lunch and Learn that you did recently was very well received, very well attended, one of our best attended Lunch and Learn. So obviously your message is right on point with the families that we serve, and I think the audience is going to love it.
Yeah, let's set it up just a little because we bring up a good point. So we help people plan for retirement, but you don't plan to be able to, you don't claim, Loren, or the other retirement planners to be able to do anything. You're not an attorney. So we have a good relationship with an estate planning attorney that we are, the families and individuals we work with, we work hand in hand, and you are not a funeral director. But here's the good news. We know a good one. We brought him in, he held a lunch and learn, talked to the families and individuals that we worked with, and they had a lot of questions for you, Ryan. So we're just going to talk about some of the questions that they had. But before we dive into the questions, let's learn more about you. How did you get into this business, and tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, first, guys, thanks for having me, and very nice to meet you, Loren and Molly as well, and thanks for having me for the Lunch and Learn too. It was very well attended, and that was just great to see that big of a crowd and all of the great questions that we had. I do think that there are a lot of questions when it comes to funeral service and cremation service, and hopefully we can answer some of those today. A little bit about myself. I am a second generation funeral director. Some will say I was just never smart enough to do anything else. But,
or you were smart enough to do what you knew.
I do what I knew, and I also do love to do it. I do have a passion for helping families, and that's what drives me every day. Grew up in Iowa, Zering, Iowa, pretty small town in Story County, northeast Story County. Went to Colonesco High School, graduated in 1999. Right after graduation, I moved to Dallas, Texas, went to Dallas, Texas Institute of Mortuary Science, graduated in 2000, worked at University of Texas Southwest Medical School for 3 years, moved back to Kansas City, get a little bit closer to home, worked for a funeral home there for 2 or 3 years. Dad put the carrot out in front of me and said, move back home, I'll pay you, and we'll pay for some more college for you. And I got home, and he sure didn't pay me much. So I got a job at Iowa Donor Network and had the opportunity to work in donation for 7 years before I had started my own funeral home and kind of did my own thing.
So you're saying Dad did not give you the easy route?
I did not get the easy route. Never had the easy route. But again, I think that's for the better at this point. You know, I do things on my own, and it's driven me a little bit to make my own success.
And he knew how to get you back home.
He did know how to get me back home. Yep, the bribe worked, but it didn't pay off.
So today we want to focus a lot on the pre-planning portion of things because it goes hand in hand with what we talk about here at Merkle Retirement Planning about your best retirement is one that you've planned for, planning ahead. So let's speak to what it looks like when you don't plan, Ryan, because you've seen it and you work with people who pre-plan and people who don't, because they all need this end-of-life care that you provide. But there is a big difference when you sit in a room with families who've done the pre-planning and families who have not.
Completely night and day difference, Molly. I mean, just the deer in the headlight look from the families that have no idea, no plan. We meet with a lot of families even where their loved one's been in hospice for a week or two and they still haven't even selected a funeral home. The likelihood of getting out of hospice at that point is slim to none, and still no plan in place, still no. We don't know if we want a funeral. We don't know if we want a cremation. We don't know where funds are at. We don't know how to access funds. We don't know if there's any money there at all. And here they are at the end of the life, and none of those plans were in place, versus somebody who has everything drawn out to the T of what they want for their service and knows exactly what they want. They've told their family. Completely different feel when you're sitting with a funeral director the next morning after your loved one passed away.
So what does planning ahead look like? What decisions do you have to make? What does the meeting entail?
So planning ahead can look a little bit different for a lot of different people, but the thing that I like to talk most about is what type of services do you want? We want all of your biographical information so we can at least file a death certificate. We can then also file Social Security. Then from there you get into the details of the service itself and where you want to be buried at. Do you want to be buried? Do you want cremation? Do you want embalming? Do you want a casket? Do you want an urn? If you're getting cremated, do you want buried? So all of those details, can be documented at a funeral home. You can still take a copy home with you, but then you need to tell your family, if you've done that, where it can be found at and where my plans are located at. We do get that sometimes too, families calling around. Mom or dad told them that they had a pre-plan but didn't tell them a funeral home, so they call every funeral home in the 30-mile radius to see if they made that plan with that location. So the most important part to me is having the plan, talking about the plan, and then sharing with your loved ones where that plan can be. And again, there are a lot of kids that don't like to hear about mom or dad talking about death. There's a lot of grandkids that don't want to hear about it, spouses that don't want to talk about it. But that to me is the most important thing when it comes to pre-planning, is just talking over those details and having a plan. Then comes the second part of actually financing the plan or paying ahead if you choose to do that. But again, that to me is the least important part of it. Having the plan really does, save that family that burden of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do in a sudden event. Let alone if you have that time where it's coming and somebody is sick, versus just that sudden event of a car accident or a house fire or any tragic event.
And therein lies a big part of that problem is individual spouses, kids, grandkids don't like to talk about death. That's not a sexy topic to talk about, but it is something that's absolutely essential as a part of making sure that the funeral services and everything that goes along with the death happens the way that you want it to happen. I think it's kind of a shame, but as you just explained, it does happen, is you take the time, you take the effort to pre-plan, but then you don't communicate. That last step of not communicating the efforts that you took and the details around those efforts can still leave a lot of chaos and a lot of havoc for your survivors. One of the things that we do for a lot of the families, for all the families that we work with, is we deliver to them a comprehensive, customized written plan. And that written binder, that written plan, offers space to put information like this in it. So our families, if they're pre-planning for this type of service, one of the really cool things that they could do is put that information in their plan. Because if they pass away, either unexpectedly or there's a known reason that they're going to pass in the short period of time, their survivors, their kids, their grandkids, they find this packet, this book, this kit, their plan, and then they can see, as of this date, here's all of the assets that they have, and whether it's investments, the IRAs, the 401k plans, the brokerage accounts, here's where they're at, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Schwab, and then, oh, by the way, here's their will, here's their trust if they have one, and then here's the details around the pre-planned funeral services that they have. Their kids find that, and then all that information is right there at their disposal, and it will cut down a lot of time, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, because it's there easy to find. What a great way to marriage what it is that you're doing with something like a retirement planner would do in the form of delivering all that information to the survivors in one nice, neat place.
Very good plan and very good thing to have in one place. The little disclaimer I'd put there is don't lock it in a lockbox at a bank. If you pass away on Friday, your family doesn't know your plan until Monday. And again, tell your family where that plan is at. Without a doubt, somewhere within the house, hopefully at least a fireproof safe, and then that way you do have access to that if something happens suddenly.
Absolutely, that's a great tip.
So at the Lunch and Learn, one of the first questions you took from the families and individuals that we work with is someone raised their hand and said, hey Ryan, let's say I pre-plan. What happens if you go out of business?
So that is actually a great question, and one of those that we do happen to get a call on once a week when we do deal with families that we're pre-planning with, or they're taking that step to pre-plan with us, is they always want to know if we go out of business. And I even say I could die. I'm in the same boat as you guys. If I die, go out of business. The good news is when you do prepay, that money is kept either in a burial trust account or in a life insurance policy that we write on your behalf. And that money is always there 100% with our company until the person passes away, and then it's payable to us at the time of death. So the good news is even if we don't go out of business, even if I don't die, if you move to Florida and you die in Florida, that money can still transfer down to Florida with you. The only difference is they might not guarantee our prices, only we can guarantee our prices. But that money is always there until you pass away. Once it's paid up, it is paid in full, and you no longer have to make any payments on that. So it's a little bit different of a life insurance policy where you don't have to pay on it forever. Once it's paid, it's paid.
Can we dive a little bit more into actually how that would work? So, and let's just take the case where they buy a prepaid life insurance policy. So they pay it up. They're not making premium payments to the life insurance policy anymore. When they die, those proceeds are going to be payable to you because that's what pays for the funeral services. Correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And then on the same theme of you going out of business, so they purchase this policy, they're not making premiums anymore, it's payable to you, you're out of business, they pass away, then who does that get paid to so it can transfer if they're in Florida or Wisconsin or whatever?
So whatever funeral home the family selects, it gets paid to directly to them. So Homesteaders is who we write for the most. They're in West Des Moines. For that policy purposes of life insurance, we write with Homesteaders. If it's in a burial trust at a bank, that bank would then still release it to the receiving funeral home who has custody of the loved one.
Okay, so if it's going to Homesteaders, but they're at a different funeral home, then Homesteaders would then send the proceeds to whatever.
Correct. Yep.
Facility
Homesteaders will send and release the funds to any funeral home without any questions asked, as long as they can prove they have the loved one in their care.
Let's see you pre-plan today, you pay, but you don't die for 20 or 30 years. Clearly, the cost of the whole entire service goes up. How do you deal with that?
So that's, again, another great question when it comes to pre-planning. And so when you do pre-plan a service and the merchandise with any funeral home, or I can't say with any funeral home, I should say with us, again, we write those policies typically to Homesteaders Life Company in West Des Moines. We guarantee the price of the service not to go up, and we guarantee the merchandise, whether it is a casket or an urn, not to go up. You do lock in that payment. So again, over the 20 years that you pass away, we would still honor the price that you prepaid for the service 20 years prior. What we do is we get a little bit of growth on the money, and so that's how we can guarantee to lock it in. There's a third part of this funeral service or cremation service that if you were to pre-play would be cash advance items such as opening and closing of a grave or an obituary. We can sure put good numbers on those when we pre-plan, but again, we can't guarantee those. Those aren't our costs. But specifically with caskets, we work with casket company, and that's tied into Homesteaders. They put a price freeze on our casket, even if it is 20 years to go down. So that way we're still paying what we paid today for that casket then.
And what are you seeing? I guess that's an interesting point. What are you seeing these days? Because 25 years ago when my grandpa and grandma passed away, most people, I would say, were doing caskets and having that kind of service. What are you seeing now? I feel like the trend is going more towards cremation, but I guess you tell us.
So again, that's exactly right. I went to mortuary school in 1999, and Iowa had a 3-4% cremation rate. Last year, they claim all of Iowa was 55%. I think more in the central Iowa area. area, we're going to be closer to 60 to 65% cremation. Now, some of those people are still having a service prior with the body present, with a rental casket, and then moving forward with cremation from there. Again, I would still say that's a smaller percentage of that 60% cremation in Iowa that they're still having a body present.
So let's talk costs. What are you looking at for prepaid funeral?
So prepaid funeral in the Des Moines Retro is going to be right about $7,000 for everything we do. That's going to be all of the services from picking up to the embalming to the use of the hearse. From there, that does include a minimum casket and our minimum vault as well. From there, though, families would still have the additional expense of opening and closing the grave if they want any paid obituaries. From there, flowers would be in addition to that. If they're going to cater a luncheon, would be in addition to that. Paying a minister and an organist, or musicians to be a part of the service. Ideally, you're probably going to be right about $2,500 in cash advances for a normal service in the central Iowa area.
Ryan, jaws are dropping. Jaws are dropping because we have listeners from all over the country, and you said $7,000. I feel like people are used to hearing more like $15,000 and $20,000. Why are some costs, again, I know in different areas of the country, things just generally cost more than they do here in the Midwest, but why are some costs so much higher than what you guys do?
So again, even some other local funeral homes in town would have those higher costs. Our philosophy is to not have the $4 million building locally. And so again, we work out of churches, we work out of community centers, we work out of event centers. Not having that $4 million building in Des Moines saves us a lot, and we pass the costs on to you. We obviously own small town funeral homes. We can work out of those for all of our preparation work. We have our own crematory. So that's been the biggest thing when I started Celebrate Life Iowa was how can I make the cost lower? How can I compete in a larger market versus just small town central Iowa? So we came to West Des Moines in 2013 and opened an arrangement office. And again, it's just that. It's not a big fancy funeral home, but it's a nice office where we meet families at an almost daily basis to one, at-need families where somebody has passed away, they've lost their loved one, or prearranged families of those people that want to plan ahead. In 2016, we did the same thing in the North Liberty office, which is a metro of Iowa City. I kind of liked it, picked it because we're close to Cedar Rapids, we're close to Iowa City, and again, that one's been very successful for us as well, being the low cost cremation provider over in eastern Iowa as well. What we don't do in that office is we would not do funerals. We would not do memorial services. We are just strictly cremation. From a staffing point, we just haven't got there yet. We're not serving enough clientele to kind of really have me have a full-time funeral director there on a daily basis.
Yeah, so maybe that's something that you're building to in that location. So right now it's just the cremation services. Somebody wants the bare bones cremation, that's what they're going to get there.
Correct. And pricing for cremation in the Des Moines Metro is going to be $1,295 for everything. Over in Iowa City, it is $1,695 just for the fact that that additional removal fee, we still based our price from the Des Moines price, so we do charge a little bit extra for that pickup of somebody in the eastern Iowa area.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the conversations that most of the time I have with family members who are just exploring this for the very first time, and they're thinking about, they're tossing out numbers like $10,000, $15,000 to take care of this whole thing. In fact, some of the families that we work with have purchased prepaid funeral services, and they were upwards to that amount. So when you're throwing out numbers like $1,300, $7,000, $2,500 add-on, I think that's a significant difference than some of the other experiences that people are having right here in central Iowa, not to mention other areas around the country. Let's talk a little bit more about that $7,000 number, because you kind of highlighted a couple different ways that people can pay for that. Obviously, option number one is they can just pay $7,000 up front. Is that correct?
Correct. And yeah, anybody that pays ahead of time in Iowa before they pass away, we cannot take their money as the funeral home and cash that check. We have to either put it in a burial trust account or we have to put it in a life insurance policy.
Okay.
If we write it into the life insurance policy and they pay that full amount, it is paid up forever. And that is one of those things where we guarantee our merchandise that we sold them, and we guarantee our services we sold them, even if it is 25 years down the road.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So the $7,000, they're paying that, they're writing the check, $7,000, and that's either going to a bank in a trust account or into a life insurance policy, and that's one of the ways that you can guarantee that price is never going to increase, because the death benefit then would be higher than $7,000, right? So that's going to cover the inflationary costs. If that $7,000 is sitting at the bank's going to pay an interest on that. That's going to help you cover that inflationary cost.
Correct. That's exactly how it's set up. Yep. And we are governed by the Iowa Insurance Division every year, and have to file a report annually with them to prove that that money is still where it's supposed to be. I assume over the years some bad apples ran off with the money, and that's obviously why we're here. And for the good and for the benefit of all Iowans, anybody that does prepay, we are governed pretty strictly.
That's good. I think that's valuable information, because that's one of the questions I do get every once in a while. Or I guess not every once in a while. One time I had somebody who had a really poor experience because their parents pre-planned, and then their experience was they didn't get what they wanted. They didn't get what they felt like they were promised. And this is, I think, that explanation helps people have more confidence that no matter what happens, their cost is never going to increase, because most of the complaint, or I guess the issues, were around the cost was greater than what their parents had planned.
But again, you didn't hear the full story, and there could have been that version where they wanted a catered luncheon where the expenses have gone on for that. They wanted obituaries in every paper. I mean, you can spend $7,000 in the Des Moines Register anymore for an obituary.
That's right.
That could have been on that pre-planning where there could have been that difference too. Not that there was in that instance, but I'm just saying it could be possible.
Well, yeah, and I think that one is a potential area of disconnect because their parents planned it. They were not present. I don't think there was a lot of conversation between them and their parents as far as what they actually wanted or were going to receive. So definitely an opportunity for disconnect. What do you guys do to help alleviate that? There's probably that same phenomenon taking place where the parents are going to do all the planning. It's their responsibility. They're going to pay for it. They're going to select what they want. And then they pass away, the kids come in, and then is there something that you give that says, here's exactly what you paid for, here's the expectations, and then that way it helps alleviate some of that disconnect?
Absolutely. So when those parents pre-plan, there are forms that they had to sign. And again, it covers right on those forms what was guaranteed, what's not guaranteed. Again, the service and the merchandise is going to be guaranteed. But those cash advances can change. And again, if they made any changes to those plans, or if they underfunded them initially or didn't put any money on there at all, that's where that difference can come in. So again, I would have those forms right in front of them and walk them through that process. Hey, this is what your mom or dad didn't select. This is what's missing, but this is what's telling me, what you're telling me that you want. That is going to be an additional cost to you.
What about if I wanted a special song and I put that in my pre-planning? We sat down, Ryan said, this is the song, On Eagle's Wings, or on something like that. And then one of my 4 lovely children comes in and says, that is a lame song. We are not playing that. I definitely want the updated, newest thing.
So again, we're at the mercy of the family. And again, they can make those changes. They can change your full prepaid funeral to a direct cremation with no services. Excuse me. They can change your full funeral prepaid into a direct cremation with no services if they choose to do that.
Is there anything that they can do, anything Molly can do? I feel like you put some thought into this, Molly. Which is good. You're pre-planning, right?
I'm pre-planning. I got a song in mind. I really don't have a song in mind, but
is there anything that Molly can do to prevent her kids from doing that?
So there is a form in Iowa called a directive of disposition, and all it needs to be is notarized, and you can bypass any of your family.
Even your spouse?
Even your spouse.
All right.
But you do have to at least put it with somebody that you really trust will honor your wishes. Because if they have that
so is that your spouse?
We have to follow that.
That's another podcast.
Is this where an attorney would come into play? Is an attorney necessary for any of this kind of stuff to make sure that these wishes are fulfilled, or is that not really necessary?
So an attorney is not necessary for that form. It just needs to be notarized and have a witness.
Okay, so when you say give that to somebody who you really trust, it would be somebody within your personal network that you can count on, ride or die.
Correct. And it might not be your family, as you mentioned.
Or put it inside your retirement plan. I mean, that's a great case for this legacy piece of the comprehensive retirement plan.
Yeah, definitely put it within the retirement plan with all of the information associated with the prepaid funeral. I think what you're saying, Ryan, is that if somebody who gets that plan, sees that document, says, wait a minute, Molly was not thinking correctly. That song should not be played. We're going to play this one. All they have to do is not furnish that piece of paper. Is that what I heard?
So by that piece of paper, you mean the directive of disposition?
Yes.
Yeah, that is correct. They would just have to not furnish it. And then that is kind of one of the light ways that the law reads too. There's no mandate, but in Iowa to cremate somebody, there's kind of a recommended 40-hour hold just in case somebody else comes forward before you cremate in order to prove that they have rights and the family may not.
Speaking of cremation, you got some interesting questions at the Lunch and Learn about ashes. What are the laws on that?
So the way the law reads in Iowa, ashes can only be spread in a designated spreading area. And as I mentioned in that Lunch and Learn, I now know of one in Iowa, finally for the first time in 20 years. Laurel Hill Cemetery on the east side of Des Moines does have a designated scattering area.
Oh, no. I just realized that completely ruined my parents' plans. Are you saying there has to be a designated ash spreading? So my parents, they live on 40 acres and they have a pet cemetery where they've buried all of their cats and their beloved pets. And their plan is to spread their ashes in that cemetery.
So again, the way the law reads in Iowa, you could not do that.
Are you catching the way the law reads? We all know people scatter ashes.
And I've never heard of anybody being caught.
Arrested
I've never
for
heard
scattering
of what
ashes?
the repercussion is if you do get caught.
But you know the laws as a funeral director. That's a good thing.
All right, Mom and Dad, plan's still on.
Plan is still on to scatter the ashes in the pet cemetery at the Merkle compound. Speaking of pets, you cremate pets as well. Some interesting information on that. You go up to, what did you say, 300 pounds? But if it's over 300 pounds, they have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that is correct. We can't do a horse. We've done certainly goats and small, we've done extremely large dogs of 200 plus pounds, but our unit is much smaller, and again, up to 300 pounds is basically what we do. We've done pigs, potbelly pigs, chinchillas, hermit crabs, goldfish, you name it. We've almost done every pet that we can think of. We even had a pet badger once, which I cannot imagine having a pet badger.
Did not know there was such a thing as a pet badger.
Did not either.
What is the most important skill set that you have to have for this job?
I think it's being able to talk to people, being able to listen, and then also being able to follow through with what the family wants. Our job is really to listen, figure out the plan, not necessarily tell them what they need, but listen through the process, come up with a plan that they agree on, and then our job is to follow through on the details. It really should take the burden off of them by having a funeral director present at the service, because they need to show up and grieve, and then kind of an idea of options on where to be standing, where they should do, what they shouldn't do. And again, we listen to what they want and make sure that their friends follow that. From there, I think embalming still is an art. I think it's a lost art, why we're seeing cremation so high. People come in and realize their loved ones don't look as good as they should, and so that's turned people off from having full funerals. I think that viewing is still very important for closure, but again, we do a lot of viewings without embalming still, where the private family comes in and just has a little time. We still prepare them, make them look as good as possible without embalming, give them their time they need, and again, that does help in the grieving process. More especially even for the younger people, the sudden deaths, than, grandma who's 98's been in hospice for 3 months. You know it's coming, and you've got to spend time with her in hospice. So I think that's something that's being overlooked with cremation being as high as it is. But again, we still put value on it. We still think it's important, and a lot of our families still get that opportunity, even if they're having cremation.
You had some great advice in the Lunch and Learn about the timeline of all of this, and really from your experience of 20 years of doing this, you do not recommend that people wait more than, a couple of weeks to have some kind of a service.
I think if you're going to have a service, and again, most people still do, whether they do it on their own or they still have a funeral home involved with it, Yeah, absolutely, 100%. 2 to 3 weeks is a really good time frame. And again, probably still just a little bit on the longer side. But again, I recommend that much over the person that 6, 7 months out after the death is going to hold a service. That weighs in on them every day, and they can't stop thinking about it. And then they change this and they change that and they change this, just for the fact that it's still sitting on their shoulder. Once you have that opportunity for friends and families to come give you condolences, share those stories, get those laughs in of the good times that people had and those good memories. There's something about it that just does bring a little bit of closure to a passing of a loved one. And again, dragging it out.
Yeah, and that's just another reason to advocate for the pre-plan. If you've already taken care of most of the details according to your wishes, then your kids, your grandkids, they can work with the funeral director to fulfill those, and it's probably much quicker, it's much easier. They don't have to, it's less likely that they're going to drag it out for weeks on end.
Loren, when Ryan was talking about the important skill set to have in his position, sounded a lot to me like what retirement planners do. The big difference I heard was that you get to hand the plan off and they get to go do the fun thing of living in retirement. You hand the plan off and then they have to grieve and go through that process, but there is a lot of overlap in the skill sets.
There are many parallels to what Ryan was describing versus what it is that we do, and I think that's why this topic goes so well with what it is that we bring to our families. One of the promises that we make to the families that we work with is, yes, we're going to help you build an income plan to show you how you can maximize your Social Security and your pension and take income from your investments, and we're going to show you how to create a recession-resistant portfolio so you don't have to worry about your portfolio blowing up when the markets blow up. And yes, we're going to help you mitigate the impact of taxes and decrease your overall retirement tax bill. Most people that are retiring today or within the next 5 years have the vast majority of their money in pre-tax accounts like 401k plans and IRAs that you have never paid taxes on before. That's a big tax bill. You have to pay some attention to that. But yes, also we're going to build out a legacy plan that's effective for you while you're alive, but we want to be there with you to help fulfill your final wishes of that legacy plan that we built together, and make sure that the wishes that you had, the assets that you have left over, do transition in the most effective way to your kids and your loved ones, and meet with your kids and work with your kids so they have an understanding of what tax consequences take place when these assets transition over to their inherited IRAs or their brokerage accounts. And then also to try to help fulfill them to meet their retirement plan, because your legacy works in a lot of different ways, and the monetary component is just one component of that. And your legacy is what it is what kind of impact did you have on your kids? What kind of impact did you have on your community? What kind of impact did you have on your grandkids? And the skill set of being able to not tell somebody what to do, but to listen to what is important to them, and then to try to, and then to give them the information that's pertinent to them to help them make these decisions, because these are decisions, much like retiring, these are decisions that people probably only make once. They've never had to go through this before. They may have gone through an experience with their parents that maybe didn't go so well because their parents didn't pre-plan. We see that a lot. And
imagine being in that position where you lose your loved one today unexpectedly, and you're thrown in to meet with the funeral director tomorrow, where your world is just absolutely shattered. You have all the grief and all of that going on, and then trying to plan something that you had no plan for. Completely different than exactly what you're just describing on how great that is, having that plan. And it does tie in, it's just hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, you see that, and I know you alluded to it earlier, maybe paint an even clearer picture to try to drive that point home. Your kids go in to meet with Ryan for the very first time. They've never met Ryan. That you don't have a plan in place, and they are sorting through all the emotions of losing you suddenly and trying to figure out what did you want to have happen, because you probably have not talked about cremation or casket or open or closed, or what types of food do you want. You probably have not talked in that kind of detail. So you're sitting here or your kids are sitting here with Ryan for the very first time, of whom they don't know, trying to figure out all these different things and still weaving through these emotions. The experience that you see those kids going through is substantially different than the experience that you see those who are now just taking over a developed plan that they're going to facilitate and work in partnership with you to complete.
Absolutely, night and day different. And then the other thing, if somebody has their financials in order, it makes our process still a whole lot easier too. How is it going to be funded for? Who has the funds? Who doesn't have funds? Who has access to the funds? One little note that I took here, and I put a little exclamation by it, is a trust. And again, I don't know what you guys cover on those or what you don't. Personally, I love them. People that have a trust typically have a plan for everything else. And then also, it's a very smooth transition for them once they pass away. There's already that executor that has the charge. They're already are on all of that. There's no property that needs transferred. There's not going to be a probate. They can keep accounts open. I love trusts. I think everybody should have trusts. Once you're over 60 years old, I tell everybody you should own a thing, put it all in a trust, and I'm a believer in that. So again, I don't know with your clientele how often you get into that, or if that's something that you guys help set up.
That's a part of the legacy plan that we built. Do you need a trust? If so, how do you use a trust? Because there's a lot of people out there. Really, there's one main misconception is you have to be ultra wealthy. Molly, we talk about that quite a bit. You do not have to be ultra wealthy to need or want a trust. Everybody has an estate. No matter how much in assets you have or investments you have an estate. And now everybody's going to pass away. So now it's a matter of when you pass away, how does it transition to your loved ones in the most efficient way possible? And for many people, that is a trust. So we do work through them. What does a trust do? If you have a trust, how do you use a trust? Because there are many people out there who create a trust. They go through the expense, they go through the time and spend the resources to set up a trust, and then they don't know how to use it. So they pass away, and it's not even a part of their legacy transition because it's not used right. So we work through all of that. Let's get a trust if it's appropriate, and then here's how you use it, and then it should make everything transition much easier once you do pass.
We found that to be the case, absolutely, on those families that we serve with trust. It's just so much easier for them to go through all of the, things that need done when somebody passes away, that it appears to be the right thing to do for a lot of people that still haven't done it.
Yep.
Speaking of still haven't done it, you guys, we all have this stuff in our life. It sounds good. I'm sure there's no one listening right now that doesn't think, yeah, I probably should at least start thinking about my legacy plan, my end of life plan. But it's taking action. That's the hard part sometimes in life. You need it, you should, but now what do I do? So we've got an action step that I feel like is a really good way to get this ball rolling. You can talk directly with a retirement planner. So you can start talking about your legacy. We can get you more information on how to contact Ryan. We will put his information in the show notes though, so don't worry about that. You can contact him directly. But this legacy plan, this piece of your retirement, or maybe you've got other retirement questions that you want to have answered. You heard Loren just kind of touch on retirement income and tax planning and your 401k and pre-tax, and there's a lot that goes into it. So here's what you can do. It's an action step. You can schedule a 15-minute retirement checkup call. This is a complimentary 15-minute retirement checkup call. Go to merkleretire.com. That's MERKLE retire.com. There's a calendar there. You can schedule a time and date that works for you, and you can get the ball rolling because all of this planning is important. And I know both of you sitting there will say, you'll be glad you did it. Once you have the meeting, once you set up the plan, there is so much relief. You've both seen the relief on people's faces once they get through this process.
What we've seen in our experience is the hardest thing is to get started. The hardest thing is to get started. Oftentimes people don't know where to get started, what a retirement plan looks like, what a prepaid funeral plan looks like. The hardest thing is to pick up the phone, set up that 15-minute checkup call, and everything will fall into place from there. And it'll be so much easier than what you think. And then, yes, the relief that you're going to experience because you know that your retirement is taken care of and your funeral is taken care of it's hard to imagine what that feels like right now. But think about the stress and the anxiety that comes with just thinking about all the stuff that you haven't done. Get it done. Just take the first step. You'll feel a lot better.
And 8 out of 10 families will say it out loud after they prearrange for their funeral. Man, I feel so much better. I'm so relieved. And that's kind of interesting. That's something I wouldn't think about even saying or think about that. but we get that feedback constantly. It has been a burden on them for a while. It has been eating at them. They don't want to leave any of the details for their kids. They don't want to make them pay for it. So they go ahead and pre-plan. And again, we hear it out loud right when they're walking out the door. So it is one of those things that does help a family, and it helps their kids.
Again, we'll put Ryan's contact information in the show notes. We'll also put that link to the complimentary 15-minute retirement checkup call so you can get your schedule today. And we'll keep talking about all of the aspects of retirement on this podcast. It's Retiring Today, and we thank you for listening. Merkle Retirement Planning is an independent financial services firm helping individuals create retirement strategies using a variety of investments and insurance products to custom suit their goals and objectives. Any information discussed in these shows is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as investment, tax, or legal advice. Investment advisory services are offered through Elite Retirement Planning LLC. Insurance services are offered through MRP Insurance LLC.